Welcome back on the Good Morning Artesia radio show. Time, as we do a couple times a month, to bring on the mayor, Raye Miller, and recap city council news and information. And glad you could make it in today.
I'm glad to be here.
There was so many things last night. There was volleyball, there was soccer, there was city council meeting last night.
Well, the good thing we were indoors. I'm not sure soccer in that wind was probably as nice as folks would like it. But,
No.
It's a thing where I think I had youth football that I had an opportunity to go to at 7:30, and I chose to go to quarterback club. But the wind basically kind of laid down at that point. So.
Well, and the youth football, they've been using the complex out at J.C. Park, and that's turned out to be really popular.
Oh, yeah. It's a thing where between their games and now the soccer, youth soccer is actually going a tremendous amount of use and really nice facility, really indebted to the folks that did all of the donations to actually provide that, because the city did not pay anything in the development of that facility. So really a nice facility, and you see a lot of folks. Well, you saw a lot of folks in the old days. You just had to worry whether you're going to sprain your ankle walking over in the nearest gopher hole that you couldn't see in the Bermuda grass. But those problems are all gone at this point.
That's true. Well, where would you like to begin with?
We'll just start at the top and kind of work down. We wound up, we had recognition of one of our city water employees. I think it was Jennifer, got a nice compliment on her. Person had come in right at the end of the day, didn't have exactly what they needed to get their water problem resolved. They told her that they'd run to the house and come back. When they got back, it was after 5 o'clock. She was still there. She took care of them, and they were surprised. I mean, because they figured, at 5 o'clock, the city locked the doors and left. Mm-hmm. But anyway, she stayed, took care of their problem, and it's a thing where it's nice to give an employee recognition for that. Likewise, on our consent agenda, we wound up having several promotions inside of our police department, and our new Commander Letcher actually attended the meeting. He asked to speak, but rather than recognize him up in the city departments and employees, we waited until council approved his promotion.
Probably good.
And then he spoke and thanked the council. And, obviously it's a great thing to actually promote your folks from within and to see them move up the ranks. And so that was really good. We had a period of hearing from visitors, and there were a lot of folks in our audience, but nobody spoke at that point. We had our typical reports in committee, but there was nothing exciting there. Under our personnel, each year the city considers awarding safety pay program bonuses or payments to the employees who have not had accidents, not been off for workman's comp and stuff. And that was approved last night. I think those are usually done in November, and so they'll be awarded like they have been normally. It's a thing where the fire department had a mutual aid agreement between Eddy County Fire and Artesia Fire, which was just basically an update to our existing agreement with new dates and all. That was certainly approved. And then under the community development, Jim McGuire has had a couple of meetings with the planning committee, the group of counselors that serve on his committee, and the discussion has been about the old armory at 405 or 409 West Center, about possibly looking at doing the asbestos and lead paint removal. There was some discussion about going ahead and approving that last night, but we had a quote on the asbestos, but we only had a per hour figure for the lead paint, and so the council asked Jim to, or directed staff to go back to to the contractor, get us actually a quote so that we can see what the total bill for the removal of those items, since it's things that our own employees can't do legally or safely. We're not trained for that type of stuff, to get that in a position where at least the environmental hazards associated with those facilities would be taken care of. And so hopefully he'll be able to get that and bring it back at the next meeting.
Now the armory is not in use, the military or the government doesn't own it anymore.
No, the city actually owns it, and the city has utilized it as storage space for a lot of our water department parts and stuff. But now with the really nice complex that we have up on Compress Road on the highway north of town, there's tremendous warehouse space and all, where all of the items that basically had been stored in that old airy building are now stored on nice shelves and a beautifully airtight facility that just, I mean, it's like night and day. In fact, that facility that we were able to acquire from Halliburton up there at auction was more facility than we would have ever been able to afford, and fortunately it went reasonably enough at the auction that it fell in what we anticipated we would spend for a much smaller facility.
Sure.
So it worked out really well. But
now, do those armories or those facilities, is there any time where the military or the government might come back and say,
No.
We need, so they're done.
They've deeded it to us.
Okay.
It's actually, city property at this point. It was a thing where they had the one there on North 13th, and they decided to actually sell it. There was a bidding process. The city looked at it just because it would be a nice corner lot. But then it wound up being a thing where we knew that the school system was interested because it fit in with their property complex there with all of the sports facilities and stuff that they have in that area. And I hate to have taxpayer monies bid against taxpayer monies.
Yeah.
And so basically the city just stepped aside, and the schools were successful at acquiring it, and they've really put in a lot of new facilities there to actually make that more of their warehouse and operating area. So it's,
but as far as the armory is concerned, the city right now doesn't have any plans for it, other than what was discussed last night.
Right. In fact, there was some discussion at the planning committee with the counselors about, should we consider in the future actually taking down the buildings and selling it to developer, because it's a nice large block area. I think it's 4 acres or something in there that could actually be a nice track home area and all. You saw the development off of Bowman there just south of Park Junior High that took place a few years ago, and really upgraded that community. This might be suitable for duplexes, but it's a thing where it might be senior housing. You never, but whatever it is, it's better to have it in private developers' hands and let them actually develop it and put it back into the property tax base for the city, the county, and the utilization of our utilities. All the infrastructure is obviously there with water, sewer, electricity and stuff, to where it's ideal for a development if the property had all of it was cleared,
And that's what the discussion was last night.
The discussion at the committee was that last night all we were doing was looking at about getting the lead paint and the asbestos actually consider removing, and community development, Jim McGuire actually has funds in what he tags as professional services, and so he's got budgeted amounts that would actually be available to do this if the bids come in at any type of reasonable number, which is what we expect, to where he could move forward with council approval to actually get that done. Moving on, we wound up, the next item up was infrastructure, Byron Land Fair. Probably the thing that folks need to know the most out of his presentation was our fixing to do 20th Street project, paving. And actually there's a meeting, I believe, this Thursday at 5:30 at City Hall that basically is for all the folks on that area to actually get an insight as to what's going to happen, and also that, they don't get caught unawares when their access to 20th is blocked at the end of their street,
right,
and they've got to find other ways to get out, type of thing. But anyway, that public meeting is Thursday at 5:30 this week at City Hall, and it's related to the start of the 20th Street project, because I think they're basically repaving that, all along and through there.
And from where to where will
I
that
suspect
be?
it's from like Grand to Hermosa.
Okay,
and
Grand.
I know it's a fairly good-sized project. But anyway, and I think hopefully there's been notice to a lot of the folks that live in the area. But anyway, if not, that's why I wanted to make sure I mentioned it this morning. It winds up being a thing where we got into a lot of different items with the city clerk's area, and one of them that was actually later in our discussion, but probably need to make sure I mention to the public, is the fact that we're looking at the next meeting having a public hearing for the public to actually give input to the council. But it winds up being a thing where it's on redistricting our 4 council districts. Once they do the census every 10 years or something, then you're supposed to look at the changes that have occurred, population, culture, demographics. In other words, there are a variety of variables that you're supposed to consider, because the census asks a lot of questions. So there's a lot of data that they have gathered on folks in our community. And basically, we hired a firm that has a fancy computer program that takes all the data, and they have given us 2 plans. Plan A is actually a plan that gets us within 5% of the shift. In other words, and what you see is like from 10 years ago, the number of residents now on the southwest side of our city has grown. And so as a result, with that population increase in that area, then that district that has that probably needs to shrink a little bit, to actually recognize that, or some of the folks that were formerly in that district need to go to another district so that they wind up, and so it generated a Plan A that is a 5% or within 5% of the ideal districting, and then there was a Plan B that is within 1%. So it's the more perfect plan. Now, the interesting thing when we got to looking at Plan A and Plan B, and actually at City Hall, and then also I think they were going to make copies of all these big maps available at the chamber so that folks could go down and look at them. One, we have a map of our existing districts, because a lot of folks don't even know which district they live in.
That's true.
But then the Plan A has, it's got about 4 or 5 maps, and some of it's blown up in certain sections so that you can actually see your streets and try to figure out where the border lines are between the various districts. But anyway, those are available for folks to look at, and we'll have a public hearing at our next council meeting to see if the public wants to input on whether the council should consider Plan A or Plan B. And then the council will need to make a decision and adopt the districting. In Plan A, our existing councilors would actually remain in their districts. Under Plan B, the way the lines were drawn, both of Councilor Rodriguez and Councilor Mariscal would be moved into the district with Councilor Mullen and Councilor Moreau. And then Councilor Moreau would actually be moved into the district with Councilor Hill and Councilor Hagelstein. Councilor Bratcher and Councilor Yahtzee would be still in their district, but there would be no councilors in what was formerly the district for Councilor Rodriguez and Mariscal.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it's kind of an interesting thing if they actually voted in the new plan and it was Plan B, then those councilors who would no longer live in their district would have to resign because they're no longer in the district if we adopted Plan B, and then we would wind up having to appoint councilors to serve from November until the next election, and then those seats would actually all come up on the next election rather than it just being normally the four, one from each district, where they were vacated seats.
And a couple of them would be for a 2-year term, and a couple of them would be for a full 4-year term. Wow.
Yeah.
So how anxious are they to vote themselves out of office?
Well, and, I mean, last night, all we did, some of the counselors came in early to kind of look at the maps. We tried to give them a good explanation of the maps. It's a thing where, I mean, I'm easy either way. I can certainly see that, one of the rationales for looking at Plan B of getting to the 1% is because over the next 10 years, there'll even be a greater disparity of population if you're in the 5% because of the fact that the areas that have grown, like on the southwest side, continue to grow.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, Mayor, is how much does the Plan A and Plan B account for what trends that they analyzed coming up with the maps and what it's going to look like in the next 10 years?
They don't. They look at the changes from the last 10 years to where it is now, and then they try to take the various variables that are a part of it. It's not just ethnicity or population. There's a whole bunch of variables, and that's why, they come up with a 5% plan and they come up with a 1% or as close to what they see as perfect at this point. So, I mean, if you were looking at it just ignoring the councilors and their seats, then you would probably say, well, the 1% would be best because our changes that have occurred in the last 10 years are probably going to occur similarly in the next 10, and as a result, this area could develop well. Now, also, you have things like the Yates Farm tracks there. There's been a couple of houses now that have gone up, but that property extends all the way over to the Aquatic Center in Bowman. So if development in the next 10 years fully filled that, then obviously that district would expand, its population would expand significantly because of the new rooftops there. But it's also a thing where in the last 10 years, you now have 2 new rooftops. So it hasn't been the prolific development that, has occurred that you see out in the area that Steve Usherwood and Van Webster have actually done. And then I believe the new development onto the west was done by the Canyon Stone folks who have the apartment complex. I think they were actually the developers of the tract out there. And I was certainly worried because you see things proposed for development, but then they don't occur. Well, the city had quite an investment in extending Hermosa out.
That's right.
If it became the street to nowhere, it's a problem, but obviously there has been significant housing development that has occurred out there, and in fact the city had to extend the street even further because they're now in the process of developing the second phase of that on west of the initial phase. So, but it's a thing where I'm easy. I mean, I can see the counselors, just because of the radical changes that might occur, adopting the Plan A. But anyway, we'll see how that all goes at the next meeting.
But there will be a public hearing for
public to comment, and that's one of the reasons that Chamber was there last night, Haley Klein. And so we're providing her with a copy of those maps, because you need a map of your existing districts and then comparing to the Plan A and the Plan B, because where I live there in the Country Club area and the Canyon Stone apartment area, right now that's in the district with Kent Bratcher and Jeff Yahtzee. Well, even under Plan A, we're moved into the Mariscal Raul Rodriguez district, Canyon Stone and the Country Club neighborhood. And under Plan B, we're also in the district that no longer has any counselors, but includes the area that, that they used to, or a lot of what they used to be in.
Sure. Well, it's every 10 years you've got to kind of go through that, and
right.
And this is the year to do that. So.
Yeah, and the council, I'm sure, will come to a conclusion of one or the other, and it'll work either way. It's a little more interesting if they decide on Plan B than Plan A because of the upset of the existing council. But it's a thing where it can be done whichever way they decide to go.
All right. We're going to take a break real quick.
Sure.
There's still more from last night's Artesia City Council meeting. We have the mayor with us. Stick around. We'll be right back after this.